Hey, this is Ryan of Happy Healthy Vegan. First of all, I want to say I hope you guys are all doing fine. I hope you're all healthy. This has been one of the craziest weeks I ever can remember in my entire life. And I know it's been causing a lot of stress on people. So I thought it would be a good idea to talk about an actual positive, good story about veganism that I just learned about, that the number of vegans in the United States is probably higher than you ever thought it was. Yes, according to this new study, which I'll discuss more in a second, it shows that veganism is up by over 300% over the past 15 years, and 9.7 million Americans are plant-based. So this study here was not the normal kind that I talk about here. It wasn't published by an academic person in an academic journal, a peer-reviewed journal. No, it was published by a company called Ipsos, which is a retail analytics company. And their study seemed to have three goals. One is to calculate the number of vegans in the United States, and therefore get the percentage of vegans in the United States, and also look at Google search history data and see which states have the most and least searches regarding veganism. So Ipsos begins their paper by saying veganism in the United States has grown from obscurity to become a mainstream part of the American diet. Since 2004, the number of Americans turning plant-based has reached 9.7 million people, growing from around 290,000 people over a period of 15 years. And did you notice how they seem to interchange the concept of veganism and plant-based? And nowhere in this paper did I see how they defined veganism or plant-based. They seem to use them interchangeably. So since they're making veganism be part of the title, I'm going to assume, and hopefully I'm not wrong here, that when they say plant-based, they mean vegan. So now we can answer once and for all, what percentage of Americans in the United States are vegan? And just take a guess. Just take a guess before we answer it, and we'll see how close you are when we find the actual number here. And it's actually not that hard to calculate. Since we know from their study here that 9.7 million Americans are vegan, we just need to find the total number of Americans, which is pretty easy to find, 329 million people approximately. And if you do some division, essentially 3% of America are vegan, according to this data here. And what does that mean? Well, just 10 years ago, in 2010, the best estimates were that 1% of Americans were vegan. So this is a threefold increase. So 3% might not sound like a lot, but it depends. Do you look at the glass half empty or half full? And since I'm vegan, I definitely see the glass more than half full. Let me explain why. I mean, that was a 3% increase over a decade. So let's project out to 2030, because it's 2020 right now. If that same rate continues, 3% over a decade, we'd be close to 10% vegans. And that's when some real market power really starts making us a force to be reckoned with. And already at 3%, we are a force to be reckoned with. From this study from Ipsos here, they point out how the Good Food Institute shows from their data that sales of plant-based alternatives to like meat, dairy, and eggs, these plant-based alternatives grew 17% annually compared to just 2% for the overall food industry. So in case 17% annual growth doesn't really impress you all that much, let me show you some numbers that most definitely will. From the study, it says in the year from 2018 to 2019, restaurants recorded an increase in vegan meat alternatives by 268%. That's over 2.5 times. And according to research published by the Dining Alliance, the main driver of these sales was surprisingly environmental and health concerns. So what those two bits of data there, that 268% and the reasons why people are eating these plant-based alternatives at restaurants, suggest what I've long suspected, is that the target demographic for these plant-based meats, you know, these companies, I'm not going to name them, their target demographic is non-vegans, because there's no way vegans could be buying all these plant-based burgers and stuff up, which is a good thing. I'm glad people are finally starting to understand the message that plant-based meat is way better for our environment, for our health. Maybe they saw movies like What the Health, Game Changers, Cowspiracy. They learned about how animal agriculture is the number one cause of greenhouse gas emissions, more than all of transportation combined, which is a surprise to most people. So I'm glad people are trying, and if they're not vegans, or at least not vegans yet, at least the trend is heading towards eating more plant-based. For those who are interested, I'll put a link down below so you can check out this study. I highly suggest you check this out because there's this cool interactive map where you can click on any year from the past 15 years and see how your state fared on this scale here from low to high intensity of interest in veganism as measured from Google search results relating to veganism. And as they showed here, the worst states as far as like having vegan interests were North Dakota, South Dakota, and Mississippi. And I thought Mississippi was interesting because Angie and I met a social media person called Mississippi Vegan. So if you're watching Mississippi Vegan, represent your state, get your rankings up there. And no surprise that California and Oregon ranked really well for veganism, and Nevada had a huge spike in interest in veganism over the past 5 or 6 years. So I think if anything, this study shows that veganism is far from being a fad diet, as it is sometimes unfairly accused of being in the mainstream media. This study shows that veganism has been growing steadily over the past several decades, and it's showing absolutely no sign of slowing down. In fact, it may even be accelerating. We might hit that 10% of Americans being vegans before the end of the decade if this keeps up. So anyway, leave your questions and comments down below. What do you think of 3% of Americans being vegan? That was my ballpark guess before the study, and this confirms that my estimations were pretty close. And so let me know what you think. Share this story, let people know that veganism is here to stay and it's not going anywhere. And again, I hope you guys are all being safe and staying safe and healthy. And I'll probably make some videos next week about the situation, as it's a really developing situation. Every day is a whole bunch of new stuff going on. Anyway, comment, like, and until next time, guys, let's just keep staying vegan.
Spinning circles, spinning round and round, spinning till I'm dizzy, falling to the ground. You've got me spinning circles, round and round.